The turning point actually was probably their lowest ebb this season. They lost 3-0 at home to Charlton. I think they felt as though that was the sort of turning point because they knew that wasn't acceptable. This is an unbelievably good championship team. Let's not beat around the bush there. We are talking about a team that has strength in depth that 23 other teams would kill for. I still think that on paper, they're the best team in the division.
Have Ipswich just handed promotion to Middlesbrough? Hello there, ladies and gents, and welcome to Not One for Neutrals. I'm going to be speaking to my mate, Ollie Mann, who is also a bit of an EFL and Championship expert. There's lots and lots of these sorts of videos on different channels. Today, we're going to be talking about Ipswich Town and if they've kind of blown promotion. So Ollie, Ipswich Town didn't start the best this season, did they? From minute one, I think we all expected them to be right at the top of the division. And actually, they had a pretty poor start when Sheffield United and Ipswich met each other. Neither of them had won a game of football before they battered Sheffield United 5-0. But, what caused that?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting one. And actually, it's really a difficult one because nobody saw it coming. Go back to the start of the season, and I'm sure all of us watching this video, I'm sure all of us who talk about the Championship semi-regularly just had said Ipswich will win this league. It felt as though they'd got consistency from last season. There wasn't a huge overhaul of the squad. They'd kept the core of that team together. But actually, maybe that was a little bit the downfall. When you've had such a bruising relegation, when you've also got players like Liam Delap, for example, who departed over the summer, maybe you do need a bit of a freshener. You need maybe to bring in some players who are going to have a significant impact, who maybe aren't in a, for want of a better phrase, a loser's culture. Because coming down from the Premier League, you do have a little bit of that culture affecting you. United have seen it so many times in the past. You get relegated, and just as a fan base, how do you overcome that to get used to winning again? And I think it took Ipswich quite a while to get used to that again this season. They had to sort of find the switch. I think it came probably a little bit after that. Obviously, they beat United 5-0, dominated us that day. But that wasn't the turning point. The turning point actually was probably their lowest ebb this season. They lost 3-0 at home to Charlton. And that was just, I think they felt as though that was the sort of turning point because they knew that wasn't acceptable. They knew that they have to be better than that and they needed to turn their season around. Otherwise, it really would run away from them. I think after that game, they were still bottom half of the division, really struggling to get going. And so, yeah, it took a long time for them to get used to overcoming the relegation, getting through that start. But from that point onwards, it's fair to say they have been one of the best teams in the league. They're back in the automatic promotion contention, but have they just left themselves too much to do? That's the question they've got to try and answer, isn't it, from now till May?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure there's going to be lots more twists and turns. But let's talk about why Ipswich haven't been able to stay with Boro and Coventry so far, because Jayden Philogene, we've already referenced that 5-0 defeat for the Blades against Ipswich earlier in the season. He scored 3 goals in that game. He scored a lot of goals this season and then picked up a big injury and he's been out ever since. Jayden Philogene, is that a big reason why they've not kind of pushed on and really found themselves in that top 2? Could that be a season or promotion defining moment?
I think obviously it's a really big part of anybody's season. Losing a player who's got the quality of Jayden Philogene, I mean, everybody in this division would love to have him playing for your team, starting games, leading you forward, because we know what a talent he is. But I actually think it's a bit more fundamental than that. I think in the summer, they really struggled to bring in the centre forward they've been looking for. Yes, they've carried some injuries. Players like Chuba Akpom, players like George Hirst haven't been able to get consistent game time. And so Philogene stood out at the start of the season because he was the player who was stepping up in their absence. He was the top scorer. He was particularly in games at Portman Road, was driving them forwards to get them on the front foot, to get them picking up 3 points on a regular basis. Since his injury, though, and I actually think there's been a more important injury to their season, when you analyse Ipswich's best form so far this year, particularly as we got to sort of November, running through into the 2026, Marcelino Núñez, he's been the real sort of story of the season for Ipswich. And I think integrating him into the team earlier, maybe than they did, would have had a much bigger impact. I think losing Philogene is huge, but Núñez's injury that came right at I think it was around February 2026, he missed 3 or 4 games, and that's where their form tailed off. Just when it looked like they were going to go on not just to get promoted, but to win the league. Coventry was stuttering. Yes, Boro were in good form, but Ipswich were right on their tail. Núñez was flying. He then picked up an injury. They dropped points. And that might be the period, rather than the start. Obviously, everybody will look at the start. But when they really had the momentum on their side, when it really felt as though they were scaring the teams above them, it was the injury to Núñez that I think's had the biggest impact so far on whether or not they're going to be able to overthrow Boro and take that second spot.
Yeah, and we're both Sheffield United fans, if people didn't already know that. And when we played Ipswich at Bramall Lane, we beat them 3-1. They had Chuba Akpom injured. They had George Hirst, as you said, Núñez, and of course Philogene. I think there was another one or two in there. So I think every time that we've been kind of promotion candidates, or we've got promoted in the top two, we've always had a quite settled side. It feels like they haven't really had much of a settled side for most of the season. So obviously with those other injuries in there, as well as Núñez and Philogene, do you think that's one of the reasons why they haven't kind of really cemented themselves as a top two side?
Yeah, absolutely. They're going to be looking at the form and the fitness of their attacking players in particular. I think defensively, they've had a pretty stable team. And to be honest, I think, under the radar, they've had a pretty good season as a defensive unit. There's not many teams in the division who have conceded less goals than Ipswich. That's not where it seems to have gone awry for them. And it sounds ridiculous to say this about a team who have scored 61 goals, but it feels like they score in clusters, 5 against United, for example, whereas it's the games when it gets really tight where it seems to be hitting them hardest. And it's because they don't have a consistent goal scorer. They have lots of players who sort of score in runs. They score in moments, and nobody who is just consistent one every 2 games, one every 3 games. Maybe they'll look back in January and think, should we have gone all out? We've had Patrick Bamford. He's scored 1 in 2 ever since he joined the club. And that's the kind of player that they're missing, with Ivan Azon, really exciting talent, but not able to kick on and be a consistent goal scorer. George Hirst, back to goal, link striker, excellent. Can bring in your wingers. We'll get the most out of Jack Clark. We'll get the most out of Jayden Philogene. But he himself is not going to be a focal point to fire you to a promotion because he's just not scoring goals that way. And similarly, I think one of the biggest disappointments of this championship season, not just for Ipswich, but probably across the division, is the signing of Sindre Valejele. I think I expected him to come in as a big centre forward. I know he's young. I know he's only 19, but he's coming in as the record championship signing. £18 million for a championship centre forward. He's been playing out on the wing. He's not been able to have a consistent impact. He's not creating chances. He's not really been scoring goals. I think that's what's let them down, the lack of a centre forward. And maybe the money they spent on Ejele would be better spent on bringing in a striker who would have made the difference in those tight games where they've really struggled to break teams down. For me, that's been the missing link. Yes, the injuries are huge. Yes, the injuries to key wide players have obviously had a big impact, but the lack of a proper centre forward to drive them on, that for me is the difference maker right now. We saw Boro come to Bramall Lane and he's not a goal scorer, but we got absolutely bullied by Tommy Conway. He ran us ragged. He made sure the defenders were never comfortable, never able to settle. Ipswich didn't have that focal point. Coventry came, and when the going got tough, Haji Wright scored. Really made the difference. They'd been poor all game, but he gave them an out ball and gave them the opportunity. It's just what Ipswich have missed. And I think that ultimately, I don't think they're going to make automatic promotion. And I think it's the lack of that proper attacking presence, the proper centre forward, that is probably going to be the reason they miss out.
So moving on from one transfer that didn't work to maybe another transfer that didn't work in Ashley Young. Obviously, this is a significant drain on the wage bill, you would think, because at Man United, at Everton, he must have been on a lot of money. And to come down to the Championship, I know he's getting on a little bit, but he must be still on quite a big wage. And don't get me wrong, like these really experienced players must be great for the dressing room, you would assume. But do you think they regret making that signing now? Obviously, he's another one that got injured in mid-January. Do you think they regret that one?
It was always an interesting one. They must have done this with a view to potentially the future. He must be thinking about taking his coaching badges. They must be thinking about bringing him through as a coach at the club, wanting to build off his experience. It just never really made sense to me to bring in a 40-year-old for this role. It's never going to be about what he's offering on the pitch. I think they probably might look back on it and think they could have better utilised that money because he's just had no significant impact at all on the pitch. I think he's only started 3 games, played around 400 minutes. It's just, it's not really what they would have been hoping for in the summer.
We've obviously spoken about their injuries and the fact that they're still fourth in the table, flirting with top two. Doesn't that speak about their strength in depth?
Yeah, they've got a ridiculous team for the championship. Look, we've talked a lot in negatives. They've been missing a striker. They've maybe just missed out. They had poor form to start the season. This is an unbelievably good championship team. Let's not beat around the bush there. We are talking about a team that has strength in depth that 23 other teams would kill for. Even Coventry and Boro will look at some of the strength in depth that Ipswich have got and they'll go, wish we had some of those options coming off the bench, because it's crazy. They've got players who would start in every position for every other team in the league. So, you've got to talk about a team here that are very, very competitive, that are very good. I just think that they will probably look back on this season and look at the centre forward position in particular. That's the one area where they've not got the depth. They've got lots of wingers who are outstanding. They've got lots of central midfielders who can change a game or who can run a game for you. They've got centre halves coming out of their ears. I mean, you talk about some of the players who they've got who start every week, but they've got players like Jacob Greaves. Jacob Greaves previously has been one of the best centre halves in the division, one of the best left backs in the division, if you want to look at his versatility when he was at Hull. And he's not guaranteed to play for this Ipswich team. It's crazy the options that they've got. It's crazy the team that they've got. They will look back on this as a massive missed opportunity. They'll be really disappointed that not just not getting promoted if they don't manage to get over the line, but they'll look at this and think we should have won the league. With the quality of squad they've got, the strength in depth they've got on paper, they are the best team in the championship. It's not quite worked, but that's not to say that they're bad. And for any team who I think will come up against them in the playoffs, you've got to be terrified of the options they've got, because on their day, they'll tear anybody apart.
Absolutely. And do you know what? Before we started speaking about Ipswich, I was thinking Ollie will definitely try and shoehorn Jacob Greaves into this, because I know you loved
It's so good.
Jacob Greaves at Hull. Yeah. And we'd love him, wouldn't we? We would love him at Bramall Lane. So on to their form. And,
Yeah.
they've been really, really good at home, not as good away from home. And we'll get into talking about where they are in the form table now, because they sit second at home in the form table, which is fantastic. They're fourth in the league, the second in the form table at home. You kind of understand that. However, they sit 10th in the form table away from home. So, can you pinpoint a reason why they're so much worse away from home? Because we all know that teams should be better at home than away from home. But 10th, when they sit fourth in the division, that just doesn't sound right to me.
Yeah, and it's really interesting actually when you look at some of the stats around their sort of form away from home as well, because it's where they've conceded the majority of their goals. I think it's 22 goals conceded in 16 games away from home. When you compare that with their home record, where they've only conceded 13 in 19 games, that is, if in effect, the difference. They are just so much less secure in terms of keeping it out of their own net. And I think it's a really interesting dynamic, because I imagine what's happening when you watch Ipswich at home. Teams are coming and sitting in. Teams know that they're going to one of the hardest away games in the division. They want to try and take a 0-0 for as long as they can. You can already see sort of the thought processes. Right, let's go to Ipswich. Just don't get battered. Just don't get battered. What we'll do is we'll take a 0-0, try and hit them in the last 10 minutes on the counter, see how it goes. But at home, teams are more likely to take it to him. And we've seen that with two of their more recent away games. They came to Bramall Lane and United were willing to go out and play their game. United were willing to try and take them on, try and play through the lines, and really wanted to try and control the game themselves. Now, because of game state, by the end, yes, Ipswich had dominated the possession, which maybe gives it a bit of a skew. But when that game was 0-0, even when it was 1-0, United were the team in the ascendancy trying to take the game forwards. You see the same sort of story in their away game at Ipswich. They lost 5-3 that day. And again, it's because Wrexham didn't lay down, didn't say, right, we're going to hold off and try and defend. They came out and attacked them. They said, you know what, we're going to have a go at these. We've got these on our ground. Let's make it as uncomfortable as possible. Let's get right up them. And that is something that they just don't suit, And I think that could be potentially scarring coming out of the Premier League when teams come at you and you've sort of seen it happen for 38 games where you've just not been up to it. You don't really want teams really pressing against you again, trying to find those weaknesses. They are much better suited to try and break down the low block at home, using their attacking talent, using the momentum of the crowd. And so it'll be interesting because the majority of the games they've got left are away. There's a really interesting shift in Ipswich's season. They've played 19 at home, 16 away. They've obviously got some really difficult away games that have been rearranged. I think they've still got to go to Portsmouth, that's been rearranged twice now. it's a lot for them to turn around that away form, given the pressure they're going to be feeling as we get to the end of the season. That's going to be interesting. And I think it really does skew the data a little bit when you look at, yes, they're fourth. Yes, if they win their games in hand, they'll be right on top of Middlesbrough. But actually, those away games are the story of their season. It's where they've dropped points all year long.
Yeah, and before the last game, they were 3 points behind Middlesbrough with a game in hand. And then they, after everything that we've said about their home form, they went and drew to Leicester. Now, earlier in the season, you'd be thinking, yeah, what's wrong with that? Well, Leicester are currently, as we're recording this, third bottom of the Championship. Obviously, they had that big points deduction as well, but Leicester have been rubbish all season. And drawing at home to Leicester is 2 massive points dropped. So going back to the title of this video, have Ipswich just handed promotion to Middlesbrough? Because, like I said, they were 3 points behind Middlesbrough. If they'd have beaten the team that they had to play to catch up with games, they would have gone second, and then that would have put them in the driving seat. And you've said a lot about the games they've got coming up. So do you think that's it for their automatic hopes?
I think it means that there's no margin for error. It's not over. If they win the game in hand, they're 2 points behind Boro? There's no way that you write them off. I've said throughout the video that I don't think Ipswich will do enough to get automatically promoted, because I don't think they've sorted out their away form problems, and I think they've got too many ricks in them. But if they can keep Núñez fit, they probably will feel as though they've got as good a chance as anybody of chasing that down. The Leicester game is a bit of an aberration. They've dominated that game, particularly the second half. I can't believe they've only scored 1 goal. I actually can't believe they conceded. They absolutely battered Leicester for the majority. I think they should have had a penalty. I don't really understand why it wasn't given. The referee gave a little bit of a crazy explanation. No, I didn't see it. It was right in front of him, obstructed. It doesn't make any sense, really, in terms of the way that he's approached that. So they will be feeling a little bit hard done to that they didn't get 3 points against Leicester. There will be moments where Middlesbrough drop points. So it's not terminal. It's not game over. They're not completely out of it. But for me, that was a game that they'll have been looking at, and they'll have already chalked up 3 points on their board. They will have thought that was a guaranteed home win. And so does that affect the momentum? Does that affect their confidence? Boro then winning a really, really difficult few games in a row makes it all the more pressured. And it's about who blinks first. And it does feel right now as though Ipswich are the team that's blinking. And that is a big, big worry for them in terms of trying to take it forward. So have they handed it to Boro? It's too early to say definitely yes. Do I think that this was their moment and they've sort of blown it? I think on the balance, yeah. I think they really needed to keep that pressure on, because if they win that game, then Boro go to QPR on Sunday with all the pressure on them. Do they play free-flowing and win 4-0 with all that pressure, with somebody breathing down their neck? Don't think they do. But they gave Boro a free hit at this. Boro knew they weren't going to lose any ground. And if they could get the victory over the line, they knew that it takes them out of the range of that game in hand. So it's massive. But the big one is that they still play each other. Middlesbrough versus Ipswich is a game still coming this season. So Ipswich will say it's in their hands. Win all of your games of football, including Boro, and you get promoted. You are in control of that destiny. You just can't afford any more mistakes.
Yeah, which is really tough, especially at the back end of the season when everyone's fighting for points. It's only the middle teams that you expect it to kind of be on the beach. But moving into the final question, Ollie, and let's just say, for instance, that they haven't finished in the top 2. They finished 3rd or 4th or maybe even 5th, who knows. But right now, as we speak, it goes Millwall, Ipswich, Hull, Wrexham. Let's just say they're the 4 that end up in the playoffs. I don't think it will be. That's for another video. But I think if we just say those 4 end up in the playoffs, that looks to me as a weaker, on paper, a weaker playoffs than there's been before. Now, Southampton are around, sniffing around the playoffs. They've got some very handy players in there. And don't get me wrong, Millwall deserve to be where they are. Wrexham are absolutely flying right now. Hull have hit a bit of a divot at the moment, but they've been very, very strong for the majority of the season.
Sorry, Nick. I'll die on this hill. Hull are rubbish. I'm having none of it. right? They are. If you follow the data and you follow their season all the way through to where it is today, Hull are the most false position team. If it finishes how it is now, and the semi-final is Ipswich versus Hull, Ipswich will beat Hull by more than we beat Bristol City last year. That's how much better than Hull Ipswich are. I have so much confidence of that they are just the better team. And I think if the playoffs stayed as they were, they would feel very, very confident of getting to the final. And then it gets interesting, doesn't it?
It really does, and I can't wait to talk to you about Hull in a video coming up soon. But do you think they're the best equipped side to go into, let's say, the playoff final? Now you've written Hull off against Wrexham and Millwall. Do you think that they're the team that should really make it to the promised land?
I think you would back Ipswich over 90 minutes against any team in the division. And so I think that should they end up in the playoffs, they would be the team to beat. But with that comes the pressure. And, we would have said the same about United. United last season were the best team, not automatically promoted from the Championship. But it doesn't matter when you get to Wembley. You've got to take your chances when they come. You can't afford to slip. You can't afford to let the other team get that belief and momentum. So anything can happen. But Ipswich are by far the team to beat. I still think that on paper, they're the best team in the division. And over 90 minutes, I think they can beat anybody.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Ollie. I really appreciate that. It's a good one to start with, and a good way to end this video. So yeah, here's to a few more that we've got planned, talking about different teams. Obviously, Ollie thinks that Ipswich are the best in the league and that Hull are one of the worst teams in the league.
Yep.
And and yeah, thank you very much, Ollie. Really appreciate you joining me today.
Anytime. Thank you very much for having me.